Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Week 7 game previews brought to you by QuinnBet. And thanks to everyone who's joining us live now on our X, YouTube and Twitch feeds. Thank you also, obviously, if you're listening back to us on the podcast, which is available from Friday morning onwards with all of our picks for the Week 7 games or whichever week it happens to be. We hope that if you like what you hear, you'll either tell a friend or please do like or subscribe on whichever podcast platform you're picking us up on. Really does help us, and it helps, of course, for other people to find the show. It's Brian O'Leary, Noel Dowling and Kieran Boyle here with myself, Conor Brophy, for our picks this week. Shane Brennan is in London even as we speak. He's going to be covering the Patriots Media Day tomorrow there. Shane will also be at the game in Wembley this Sunday with Craig, who's one of the Irish NFL Show's unsung heroes. Craig's the man who's responsible for the graphics and for the creative, which add greatly to the content we put out each week. So great to see Craig at the Patriots game in Wembley over the weekend. The full menu for this weekend sees us with one afternoon game on Sunday. Obviously, that's the Wembley game between the Jags and the Patriots, which we'll be previewing very shortly. There's 7 games in the 6 p.m. window, 3 9 o'clock games, and we'll close out with our Sunday night football preview. We have our Thursday night football podcast where we welcome Colm Cronin back for one night only. His beloved Broncos, of course, facing the Saints early tomorrow morning. Brian and Colm broke that one down in more detail on the podcast, which you'll find again on whichever is your platform of choice. Just 2 teams on the bye this week, so 15 out of 16 games we have this weekend. It's the Bears and the Cowboys who are on bye, incidentally. Our first segment of picks is brought to you by Root Point. And we start at the 2:30 game in London, where the Patriots take on the Jaguars, as we've just been saying. Kieran, it's been a rough week for Doug Peterson in particular. Does a win here help him out and save his job? And fundamentally, are they going to get that win?
No, it's not going to save his job, no matter what manner of a win it is. Even if they do get a win, the writing's on the wall since last week. Actually, since probably week 4, week 5. Especially that Colts game. All week here in Jacksonville, in the Jacksonville area, there's been so long to digest the game in London. So many people with their opinions. All the sports radio channels are talking about, is Doug a true head coach? Is Trevor Lawrence a leader? Was Andre Sisco right to speak up like he did in the locker room post game with local reporter Brent Martineau? It's not going to be enough to save his job. I think that the fact that they're in London for second week kind of gave him a stay of execution. I fully believe and fully think that as soon as they touch down here in the area, that'll be it for Doug. It'll be a thank you, and we'll move it along. The big question for me is whether they keep some of the other coaches like Press Taylor, Ryan Nielsen, and the future of Trent Baalke, but that's for down the line. I'll talk about the game a little bit. Both teams have major issues. I mean, it's a battle of 1 and 5 teams. It's almost like a stoppable force is meeting a movable object, and it's not a lot of offense is going to be on display, really. I actually think the Patriots are going to do a number this week on the Jags. I think the Jags are in utter shambles. I think fragmented everywhere. If you look at the 2 teams on paper, the Jaguars should win it. They have the better skill players, all around the team or all around the field. But that team is just broken right now, and I don't think anything's going to salvage it. I like the Patriots in this game. I think what Drake May showed last week is going to be enough to get them over the line. These are sad times for the Jags. I mean, that their upcoming schedule is brutal. Even if they do somehow manage to scrape a win, I mean, they have the Packers, the Eagles, the Vikings, Lions, and Texans over the next 5 weeks, basically up until Thanksgiving. And if they even got one win out of that, it still wouldn't be enough to save his job. So there's big changes coming in Jacksonville. Again, like I've said before, the battle now is going to be filling those seats and keeping home fans somewhat engaged in a season that is already basically over.
Yeah, I have to say I went back and forth on this one quite a bit. And initially I was thinking, this is Patriots against the spread here. I think, if you're ever going to pick against a 5.5 point spread, it was looking like a likely one for me. Liked what I saw, as you did, from Drake May last week. Couple of great touchdown passes to Demario Douglas and Butte last week. When he was good, he looked very good. And particularly bearing in mind how much pressure he was under.
I think we're under pressure now because we've lost Connor.
Oh,
He's
back in the room. Sorry, 3, 2, 1, and you're back in the room. It's me with the broadband problems this week, so it's not just Shane's Carlo Wi-Fi that's letting him down. Apologies. When I was cut off in my prime there, I was just saying...
wrong with Carlo Wi-Fi.
Sorry, another...
It's all kicking off here in Leinster this evening.
It was in the house. But anyway, what I was saying was, what I was particularly impressed with from May's perspective was he's under a lot of pressure in that game. Like, he's under pressure on 40% of his dropbacks, took a few sacks, showed a lot of poise. I mean, this is his first game at this level. But where I'm slightly going back the other way, leaning the other way, is I don't think the Jags are going to be that bad 2 weeks in a row. Like, to your point, Kieran, I think the question is whether the players actually quit on the coach fully or not. I think they're playing for a lot of pride this week. I think they'll be embarrassed, and probably Andre Cisco did the right thing from a playing perspective in calling that out. You know, that is going to have to provide a jolt. These are professionals, and I think they're going to want to put on a performance for themselves this week. Never mind how they feel about Peterson and whether that's the right direction or not. Rookie quarterbacks, Drake May, as well as he played last week, they tend to be volatile by nature. Is he going to repeat that performance this weekend, or is there going to be a certain amount of regression? Bearing in mind, obviously, the Jags will have had the chance to analyze that tape, and unlike their opponents last week, they're going to have a chance to diagnose some of what he can do and take some of that away from him as well. I think the Jags are a much better roster than their performance last week would have indicated. Myself and Noel talked about this at length. We saw them up close. First drive, and they had a couple of other drives, Noel, as well, where there were drops in the end zone. Brian Thomas had one, Gabe Davis had another. That just can't happen, and that's not the kind of thing that tends to be repeated from week to week. I wouldn't say the score necessarily flattered the Bears, and it did reflect the lack of fight from the Jags in the second half. But I do think they definitely could have put more points on the board than they did last week. So it's a slightly illusory margin of victory to me. I think the Jags are much better than they showed last week. And I do think that they are good enough to beat this Patriots team, regardless of the promise I saw from Drake May. Hopefully we see more of that at the weekend and we see a little bit of progress. But Patriots are just so limited all around. I just don't see them going to London and beating the Jags. I think it's a Jags win in Wembley for me. Brian?
You called out last week that we shouldn't underestimate the situation with the Bears being there. So early in the week, and the Jags had the unfortunate situation with with their travel plans being up in the air. They've been there an additional week. They played better in the second game last season against the Bills than they did in the first game against the Falcons. I don't think we should underestimate the fact they've been there now for the bones of 10 days. I think it's a huge factor. I think they're a much better side and all. With all due respect, they've got so many more players that can do damage, but unfortunately they're not. But I think they win on Sunday. I think it's a comfortable victory as well.
No.
Yeah, I'm with yourself and Brian. I think the fact they've been there so long now and that they've bedded in to their base there in London will help them immensely. And I agree with you. There were a lot of missed opportunities for them last weekend that I don't think they'll let happen against the Patriots. So I think the Jags will be too strong and they'll take the win.
All right, our next game is an AFC North clash, which are always spicy, between the Bengals and the Browns. Brian, the Bengals favoured by 6.5 in this one, coming off a win, obviously, over your Giants last week. We won't rub salt in those wounds. How do you see this one?
They weren't overly impressive last Sunday, Connor. We spoke on Monday about the last opportunity for the Giants. Joe Burrow got time and time again, and this Browns defense can get at a quarterback if they're on their game. But it's been few and far this season compared to last year. It just hasn't really gone to plan. Obviously, this week they've traded Amari Cooper away, which is arguably the best wide receiver, the most potent weapon outside of Nick Chubb, who's out on the physically unable to play list. So it feels like they're waving the white flag already. But unfortunately, the situation is we're still very early on in the season. They've got a quarterback situation there, which is going to be arguably the biggest off-season conversation, what they do with it next season, when they stick or twist. And in this instance, I'm not sold on the Bengals. They're so up and down. They put those points up on the Ravens 2 weeks ago, find a way to lose that game, stuttered to a victory last weekend. Because of the nature where the Browns are, this for me doesn't kind of have the same kind of feel about an AFC North clash that we've had over the years, where it's a spicy affair like week 1 last year, where the Browns did a number on the Bengals at home. I think it's a Bengals victory on Sunday, but it doesn't strike me as the kind of game that we'll be all excited to see over the course of the 3 hours on Red Zone.
No, as Brian was saying, I'm sure the Browns have got to be deflated seeing them trade away a star receiver like that to the Bills at this stage in the season. That sends out its own message, and you wonder how that's going to be picked up in the locker room. And on the other side of it, I'm sure it buoys the Bengals rolling into town.
Absolutely. I think Brian's right. In a way, it kind of feels like this Browns team have just waved the white flag. This offense has been horrendous all year. We talk about the quarterback and we know what's happened there. But in terms of the offensive line, hasn't done them any favors. I mean, they haven't had much there. Obviously, Brian mentions Nick Chubb, who's been out, who when he's playing and he's fit is one of the top running backs in the league. It just hasn't come together for this offense at all. They do have some players, obviously Myles Garrett, who can get pressure on the quarterback. I've not been overly impressed with their secondary. I think this team is in trouble. And on the flip side, we look at the Bengals. I mean, we've talked about it already. I still think they're in with a really good chance to make the playoffs because of the teams in between them and the wild card spot. I think if they can put 2 or 3 wins together, they can find themselves jumping up that ranking fairly quickly, and they have the players to do it. I know what Brian's saying about the Giants game last week. They weren't overly impressive, but we look at that offense the week before and we see what this offense can do if their head is right and they're going for it. And I think that's the way it'll be against this Browns team. I think they have way too much firepower there with their wide receivers, with Joe Burrow. I think this Browns team is bad. This Bengals team hasn't hit the heights it can do, but I still think it has the possibility to do it. And I think this offense will take care of the Browns this weekend and they'll win.
Kieran, who you got?
Yeah, I've got the Bengals, but I have a couple of caution points. The Bengals are actually 1-5 when Joe Burrow has played against the Browns, which is a stark, and that kind of says where the Bengals have been and where the Browns have been over the last number of years. And Burrow's been sacked 15 times so far this season, so maybe that Browns D might decide to do a little eating, but when you put it all together and you look at it in the cold light of day, I mean, the Bengals are a better team all around. Just top to bottom, I don't see any way that the Browns win this game.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same mind there. Nothing to add for me. It's a Cincinnati win as far as I'm concerned. Texans-Packers next game up. Brian, Packers 3-point favourites at Lambeau. Do they justify that?
I got caught out last weekend. I thought the Cardinals had an opportunity to go into Lambeau and cause a shock. It wasn't to be. It was the Packers offense which we felt was coming this season. Early on in the season, we saw week 1 the unfortunate injury to Love, and they kind of continued to win despite not playing that great on offense. But obviously, they had a particular game plan from Malik Willis, and it worked so effectively over the course of 2 weeks. But then we saw a very different Packers team when Jordan Love came back. I didn't think they were fantastic in SoFi the following week, and yet last weekend in the first half the Cardinals couldn't get near them. There was plays that were shown on this coverage over the course of the week where there was 4 or 5 players open at the same time. It was fantastic for the Packers fans to see so many opportunities. Watson, who was a doubt before the game, comes in, has that magnificent touchdown pass. Strikes me as a game where they can go and put huge numbers. If I haven't been overly impressed with the Texans defense in particular this season, they've started in some games, even against the Bears where they won the game. I felt there was opportunities for the Bears offense to make plays, and I think it was a little bit early in the period for Williams in terms of him getting used to the NFL and evolving into the situation that's there in front of him. And everyone who was so high in the Texans have kind of fallen off slightly over the course of the last few weeks. And people were suggesting last week that they allowed the Patriots to put a number on them, albeit they put a beat down of their own. But a lot of the points came late in the game. A lot of the yards came late in the game. It was like as if their defense tailed off. I think this is, like Noel says every week, there's a game every week where you're looking at it and you're back and forth time and time again. This is the one for me. I'm going to side with the Texans. I'm going to go against the Packers again, but I just think the Texans feel like that team that everybody was talking about going into the season. They need a marquee victory to remind people they are a legitimate team in the AFC. I think this Sunday could be the game. I think CJ Stroud balls out and the Texans win.
Yeah, I'm about a very interesting process, Brian. It's very similar to what I had going on as well. I'm kind of going against myself a little bit here because I do think the Texans are the better team. I expect better from them as the season goes along. And I think, as we were saying on the show last week, and as myself and yourself, Noel, I think we're in agreement. I like the fact that the Texans have been able to win games when they haven't been anywhere near their best. I think that will serve them well later on this season. But you are at the point where you're starting to think, okay, we need to be starting to shift gears here, lads. I don't think what I've seen from them so far is going to be good enough to win in Green Bay, where I think the Packers, conversely, are actually just coming to the simmer nicely. They're still a good bit from the boil. And there was a bit of a watch out for me from a Jordan Love perspective. He's thrown 6 picks so far this year, been a little bit careless with the football, and that's a watch out. The other thing is the Packers have struggled a little bit to handle the run, although they did better last weekend. Certainly got a handle on James Conner. Mobile quarterback and Kyler Murray definitely caused them a little bit of problems, but it's not quite the same with CJ Stroud under center for the Texans. Texans get Joe Mixon going. we could see the Packers have a tough day at home, but they're a tough out at Lambeau. I think, to your point, Brian, Matt LaFleur very much in his bag this season. He's springing guys wide open all over the place. He does it better than any other play caller I can see in the NFL right now, with the possible exception of Ben Johnson, which is a matchup that we're going to see a couple of times this year. And who knows, we may see in the playoffs and maybe decisive in the NFC. But for this one, I think the Packers will pull it out at home. Kieran?
A couple of things in play. Texans are averaging 23.8 points per game, while the Packers are averaging 27. So both teams know how to score. A healthy Joe Mixon for me is going to be the difference for the Texans. And one other thing, it's going to be sunny and 73 in Green Bay on Sunday. Very Houston-like weather. Very opposite to very much the opposite of what it was last week when the Cards were there. So these are the kind of the little things that come into play sometimes. I like the Texans for a statement victory on the road.
All right, no.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Normally I have a look at my list here of who I've picked for each game, and I actually have this one blank because I didn't know. I was kind of going with Packers for the home field advantage, but I just think this Texans team is a little bit stronger than that Packers roster. So it really is a coin toss for me, but I will go Texans because I just think they have more firepower to take the game.
All right, we'll have the auditors looking over that one. No, you better not be filling that one in at 7 o'clock on Sunday. We'll keep very close eye on that one. Make sure that everything's above board. You're still on deck for our next game now, because we've Dolphins at Colts. Colts favored in this one in Indianapolis, said 3.5 points, the margin in their favor. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I have this one where I'm back and forth as well, because initially all week I was kind of thinking Colts. We've seen the Dolphins so far this year. They certainly haven't impressed in any way, shape or form. Obviously the loss of Tua has been a really big hole for them there. We look at Waddle and Hill, they just haven't got going. That run game just hasn't got going. And I was just thinking the Colts at home should be able to take advantage of this. But the more I've kind of thought about it, and today obviously we look at some injuries the Colts have. We know they've got some injuries on defense. DeForest Buckner was gone, and we're looking at, Jonathan Taylor's been out. I don't think he's going to be back this weekend. He's a big kind of linchpin for me. Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, they're all kind of carrying injuries. So I'm starting to kind of think now that if the Dolphins have used this bye week, I think Huntley is a decent backup. I think the players I've mentioned in terms of Waddle and Hill and Achane and Mostert who's come back are players who, when they get going, can be, very effective players. And I'm banking on the Dolphins in the offseason or in the bye week to have put a plan together. Maybe Huntley has got a bit more established with them there. The Colts are missing some players. And I don't know why. I don't know why I'm doing it, but I feel like the Dolphins, it will click for them at some point with these players that they have. And I feel like this is the weekend where it might do. I know, obviously, if you look at the Colts, they have Anthony Richardson coming back. I mean, we'll see how he does. Obviously, he has a powerful arm. And one of the big things for me was the Dolphins are one of the worst teams for giving up 20-plus yard plays. And obviously, Richardson has an arm that can take advantage of that. And actually, Alec Pierce is number one with 20-plus receptions. He has 6. He's tied for us in the NFL. So that is somewhere that the Colts can hurt the Dolphins. But I don't know. I just feel like the Dolphins have enough players there that if they've used this bye week correctly, they will maybe use these players more correctly. And I think with the injuries that the Colts have, I'm going for a shock Dolphins win. I'm convincing myself as I'm talking, to be honest. I'm going with a shock Dolphins win. And I didn't think I'd be saying that about half an hour ago.
Well, have you convinced our resident Florida man that the men from Miami can go to Indy and win? What do you think, Kieran?
No, well, this game on paper, it doesn't seem to grab the attention that some of the other marquee games do this week, like the Chiefs and Niners and the Vikings game. But some pretty wild stats around this. The Dolphins, they haven't had a lead at the half this season, which is a crazy stat that I saw. The games averaged 34.6 points combined. I mean, that's even with Tua in there for a couple of games. This is not the same team without Tua, and right now the timeline for Tua is very vague. We don't know if he's going to be back next week, the week after, or if the season continues on the downward trajectory. They may just decide, you know what, let's just sit you out and we'll go again next year. Because at this stage, if the Bills start making some daylight between themselves and the rest of the division, then there may not be a need for Tua, depending on the severity. I mean, obviously we all hope that he comes back at some stage, but It's just not the same team without him. I mean, the quarterback Huntley he's really a stopgap there that was designed to be a game or two, and the longer the season goes on without Tua, it just looks more and more hopeless. I mean, you've seen some of the games where, Hill is not getting the separation, he's not getting the yards, he's not making the catches that he does when Tua is out there. The offense is not as dynamic. Now, the only thing that's going to save the Dolphins is the defense. They're actually one of the more kind of useful defenses in the league. I think they're ranked 9th right now. They got a player like Jordan Brooks, who's got 39 total tackles, and he's got 9 sacks. I mean, the Dolphins have 9 sacks and 3 interceptions in the season. Saying that, the Colts really have a better pedigree, and at this stage, which sounds crazy saying it week 7 into a season when we thought the Dolphins were going to be powering ahead in the division, but I actually think this team is better with Flacco in there, and it looks like Richardson's going to play this week. I think it's a better, more rounded team with him in there. I think he has the experience, he's got the nous, he's got the level-headedness to deal with it. I mean, Richardson's thrown 3 TDs and 6 interceptions this season so far. I think, yes, he's got the flash plays like we've discussed in the past, but he's also got that. He's got those crazy picks like in the Bears game in the back of his pocket, just waiting for them to be thrown. I think overall the Colts have more skill around it, or they have more kind of muscle memory in regards to winning games. The fact that it's at home, the Dolphins are just limping along in the season right now. And unless they the team gets some sort of light or some sort of signal that Tua will be back in the next couple of weeks, I think a lot of the players are going to be looking around going, we can't win with this guy. It's just not the same. The rhythm is not there. So I like the Colts in this game. I like them actually by a touchdown.
All right, good stuff. Brian, your pick.
Yeah, in fairness to Kieran, he had a lot of points that I would have made. I'm much more comfortable if Flacco was to continue as the quarterback. And Keith, who is a resident Dolphins fan, says he's travelling out to see them next week. I think it's more likely to see them win next week against the Cardinals than there is this week. I'm on the Colts.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the things I've been kind of intrigued by this season is, and we've given Mike McDaniel a lot of props on this show, as indeed he has gotten elsewhere for his offensive creativity, but he's been really disappointing to me in terms of, like, if you look at what Kevin O'Connell has done with backup quarterbacks, if you look at what Matt LaFleur has done with backup quarterbacks, if you look at what Sean McVay has done in the past, you look at what Kevin Stefanski did last season, like, one of the things you earn your stripes by, particularly as an offensive head coach, is what you can do with the backup. A, not having the right backup in place, and B, not being able to scheme for the backup quarterback, to me, is an indictment of McDaniel so far. Unless that turns, I don't see the Dolphins getting much joy in this game or in any other game for the foreseeable. It's Colts for me, which brings us to the end of our first segment of picks. Our second segment of picks on the Irish NFL show for week 7 is brought to you by QuinnBet. And we start this one off with a big one in the NFC North, where the Lions travel to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Noel, this is one of the defining games of the weekend. We haven't seen an awful lot of divisional games in the NFC North. In fact, I think there's only been one, Packers-Vikings, but this is huge.
It is. And for me, there are 2 or 3 really big games this weekend, but for me, this is the big one. We've obviously talked a lot about the Lions, how we admired what they've done, how Dan Campbell has coached this team, and we look at the way they've built up over the years and what they've got to, the point they've got to now. The Vikings, obviously a bit of a surprise team this year. I don't think many people had them going 5-0 to start the season. So looking at this, I think it's going to be a really good game. First off, again, injury wise, kind of plays into my thinking on this. Obviously, you look at the horrible injury for Hutchinson in Detroit, which is, I mean, first off, for that kid, that's terrible, like, and then from a football point of view, he's obviously leading the league in sacks with 7.5. He's the Lions' main guy on defense. So we're going to see how that defense now can continue without him. Will it be a big drop off, or will guys be able to step up and maybe make a difference? Because I know for the Lions, he's had the most pressure. He's had the most pressures on quarterbacks with 45, and number 2 is 17. So that's a big drop off along with the sacks for this defense. Then we look at Minnesota, who have been flying, but the last couple of games against the Pack, they fly out into a big lead, but they kind of go into the shell, and the Packers come close to kind of pulling it back. The following week in London against the Jets, they do the same thing. They go into a decent lead and they kind of slow down again. So I'm wondering if this week is going to be the week where the Vikings kind of trip themselves up. I don't know if Aaron Jones is going to make it. I know he's questionable. I don't think he practiced yesterday. I'm not sure about today. But if he doesn't play, I think this offense becomes very one-dimensional. Now, when your one dimension is Jefferson, it's not terrible, but still, it's nice to have that balance. But I just think this Lions offense will be enough to outscore Minnesota in this game. You know, we talk about the running back room that you have there. Jameson Williams, a wide receiver, has really stepped up this year and started to look like the player they wanted. Sam Laporta, when he's on form, a tight end, can make a big difference and can impact the game. So just looking at this, it's an important game. Both teams are doing really well, but I just think the Lions are going to have enough on offense to outscore this Vikings team. But I will be keeping an eye on this defense for the Lions, because it's obviously, you know, we're going to find out how they actually do without their number one player.
I bow to no one in my admiration for the Lions, even though they're a rival team of our beloved Bears in the division. I love what Dan Campbell has done. I love what Ben Johnson has done. I love what Brad Holmes has done as GM. You know, we talked last week about the rehabilitation of Jared Goff and what a great story that is. And, you know, that emotional video exchange that we saw last week where Dan Campbell gives Jared Goff the game ball and Goff gives it back saying the coaches are rock for everything that they've done in Dallas. But I'm wary of the come down, like 47-9. Unbelievable performance in Dallas, you know, particularly impressive on the offensive side, as you said, Noel. Ben Johnson dipping into the bag of tricks, the double reverse flea flicker, the hook and ladder to Penei Sewell that we talked about that didn't count because of the flag. But the Lions are all about belief. And, you know, we talk about, we've argued back and forth about going for it on a fourth down and whether Dan Campbell should or shouldn't do it as often as he does. But it's all about confidence. It's all about believing in his players. It's all about, I think, laying the tracks for when they are in those big moments in the playoff games, which they're expected to play and which they now expect to win, that the players just know that they have the full confidence and they're backed to do whatever it's going to take in those pressure moments to deliver. This is the kind of pressure moment that you would expect the Lions to deliver in, but I think they've got a lot riding, or they're up against quite a lot this weekend. As you mentioned, the Hutchinson injury is big here. I'm not sure how they're going to cope with that going forward. He's been so good this year, and that's a big, big loss for them. If you're talking about the game within the game, one of the things that I'm really excited to watch, probably above all the games this weekend, is the matchup between Ben Johnson and Brian Flores. Flores just does magical things with that defense. Ben Johnson does magical things with the offense, as I've just said. Flores, I think they're third in blitz rate. They were leading the league in blitz rate last year. You're just dialing up all sorts of creative things because he didn't have the players. He's got a slightly better roster available to him this year, and they've been doing quarterbacks heads in across the league. Famously, you know, Jared Goff is not the same quarterback when he's pressured to the degree that the Vikings are going to be able to do it. And I think that might just prove decisive here. I think the Lions are probably at risk of a little bit of regression to the mean. I think the Vikings, coming off a bye, are going to have targeted this one. It's a big, big one for them at home, and I think that'll just about get them over the line. Brian.
And Noel touched on Aaron Jones there, how effective he's been over the course of the season so far. We obviously know he's got the injury. And the fact that they traded this week for Cam Akers, for me, kind of strikes me as a move that makes me feel that they're uncomfortable with the situation which is ahead for Aaron Jones. There's been suggestions of him going on IR. He's, for me, as good as Jefferson has been, Aaron Jones has been a really nice pickup, and he's been playing so well. I think this has a feel of a bit of a high-scoring game, which might come as a bit of a surprise, bearing in mind how well Brian Flores' defense has done. But I think the Lions can put it up on most teams in this league. And then if you're asking me if this Vikings team, as good as they played, can keep up, I don't believe they can. I think the Lions win.
Kieran?
Yeah, Jared Goff, 607 yards, 5 touchdowns in his last 2 games. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown, 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games. I think, like Brian, I think it's going to be a fairly high-scoring event. I think this is going to be a marquee game of the season. I think this is going to be one of those games that people look back on the 2024 season and go, wow, remember that game in October. You know, it's in that beautiful stadium in Minnesota. They're just going to be throwing it up and down the field. I think you got 2 quarterbacks who are kind of peaking right now. And I think, like you, Connor, I mean, I love this Lions team. I love everything about them. I think they just have too much, and I think they'll win by a field goal.
Meanwhile, at the Meadowlands, we got another marquee game where Saquon is going to be hosted by the Giants, his former team. The Eagles coming into town, Kieran. This is spicy on all sorts of levels. It's going to be a lot of fun, but who's going to come out on top?
The Turnpike Battle, I-95.
The turncoat battle, if you will.
Well, yeah, you could say that too. Yeah, I mean Sirianni.
He's on fire.
It's not just the Saquon revenge game, but you got Sirianni and his antics coming to the Meadowlands too, and they definitely won't be shy in letting them know how they feel. Yeah, it's I mean, it's everywhere. It's been classed as the Saquon game, the prodigal son, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, this game is much more important than that right now for both teams. I mean, the Giants have to win this game to stay in touch, and the Eagles have to win this to basically, probably to keep Sirianni's job at this stage. The way they're trending. The Eagles have yet to score a point in the first quarter. That's a stark stat. I mean, that is just every time you're watching Red Zone or watching one of the games and that comes on, you're like, that's bananas. And the Giants are averaging a league low 0.9 points per drive at home. The Giants at home, whether it be primetime or just in general, it's not very good viewing if you're a Giants fan. It's a lot of trepidation. It's a lot of holding your breath. It's a lot of crossing the fingers and hoping for the best. The only good thing that I can say about the offense right now is that Jones has a passer rating of 90.1 in 5 games against the Eagles with 5 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That's the thing that I'm holding out hope for, despite the fact that they've been awful at home. Again, like we discussed earlier in the week, the Giants' defense is just out of this world, and that is a factor that it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be a factor because now that AJ Brown is back and Devonta Smith is back, I worry about the corners. I worry about the downfield players. I'm full of trepidation for this game because I don't like losing the Eagles almost as much as the Cowboys. This is a pivotal game for the Giants. I mean, they're hobbling in. I think Neighbors is going to be fit. I think they announced that he's going to be okay. But Singletary, there's still question marks about him. Obviously, Andrew Thomas out for the season and Josh Ezeudu filling in at left tackle is. I'd rather Ezeudu in there than Evan Neal because Evan Neal has proved himself to be just an absolute bust of a pick. But losing Andrew Thomas, one of the best left tackles in the league, is just a huge blow for the Giants. He's gone for the season. So there's going to be a lot of Daniel Jones hurry up and throw it downfield. And you got people like Blankenship, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean just waiting to scoop them up. So I can see a couple of picks, just the reckless play that Jones has, even withstanding a competent left tackle. I want to be hopeful, but I've seen this script so many times with the Giants. The Eagles are going to come in. The fact that they've got Smith and Brown back is a huge thing. If they didn't have Smith and Brown, I'd be more hopeful. But with those two weapons, I'm skeptical. I'm very nervous. And like I said, I've seen this script before. The Giants will put out well for 3 quarters and just that last 4 or 5 minutes of the game. And I haven't even mentioned the kicking fucking dilemma with the Giants too. So it's just, what do you do? What do you do? I like the Eagles. I don't like the Eagles, but I like them in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think you just touched on the decisive factor for me, which is that Devonta Smith and AJ Brown are back. The Giants defense is interesting, lead the league in sacks. They've been unmerciful in terms of the pressure they can put on the front. They're absolutely terrifying, but you can pass on that secondary. They've given up a pretty high, above average quarterback rating on throws to wide receivers. And the two struggled with the 2 marquee wide receivers for the Bengals last week, albeit that obviously they held the Bengals to 17 points overall. And they do have a tendency to have that kind of brain freeze as they did with the Joe Burrow scramble. Like, how do you let Joe Burrow in for a 47-yard touchdown run of all quarterbacks? It's not like we're dealing with Lamar Jackson here. Brilliant and all as Burrow is with his arm, you don't expect him to. I think he was saying he hasn't had a touchdown run that long since he was in grade school, which is not what you want to hear in the post-match interview of the Giants defense. As you mentioned, Kieran, the fact that it's such a crucial factor for the game that Malik Neighbors is fit says it all about where the Giants are, that it can be that reliant on a rookie wide receiver. Is not a good place to be. Some of Jones's play last week, and I've been one of his defenders, was just abysmal. Like particularly that just throw it up play that we saw, which went for the pick in the end zone. You just can't do that. You do not expect that from a guy who's been in the league this long and please playing on the kind of contract that he is. I don't particularly think that anything the Eagles have done this season at all has been particularly impressive, whether on or off the field. How badly they struggle to beat a listing and directionless Browns team who, as we talked about, have kind of quit on the season now quietly since they shipped Amari Cooper out the door. I don't think they're going to pull away from the Giants much, but I do think they're going to finish on the right side of the scoreline here. I think the Eagles probably just about justify that 3-point favoritism. No.
Yeah, I agree with exactly what you said there. I think it'll be a close one. I think the Giants will push them hard, but I just think this Eagles team will probably just scrape it. But I mean, this Eagles team should be so much better given the talent it has. It's such a disappointing team, some of these performances, but I think they'll they'll probably just scrape one out this weekend.
Brian?
It's rare I give you a quarter by quarter blow of the game, Connor, but I'll put it like this. It'll be a volatile atmosphere of the game Sunday because Saquon's coming back. The bubble will burst very early because the Eagles will probably right the wrongs of their first quarter affair this season. Giants claw their way back. Giants somehow get into the lead late on. Saquon Barkley scores the winning touchdown.
Right, we go on to the Seahawks and the Falcons, the battle of the birds. Tight spread on this one. Falcons by 2.5 points, so less than a field goal game according to the bookmakers. Brian, how do you see this one going?
Oh, this has all the traits of a game in which everybody feels is there for the Falcons. We've seen over the course of the last few weeks that Seattle have kind of come back to what many people expected. I had a conversation with Shane a few weeks ago around the Seahawks and the fact that they were 3-0, but they'd beaten week 1, they beat a Broncos team, which were struggling. Week 2, they struggled to beat the Patriots. And then week 3, they came up against the Dolphins team, without a quarterback. Realistically, the Dolphins went into that game with some struggling quarterbacks, and they found a way to win. I felt they were in a false position. And I felt the Giants and the Lions obviously took care of them, and we saw what the 49ers did to them last week. So this strikes me as a game that's there for the Falcons, and the Falcons should win this game. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Seahawks, because there's always one of these games in the weekends where it doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense because the Falcons have found ways to win games now. They're getting used to winning games that we've seen before where they lose. The Saints game, the Bucs game.
I thought you were going to give us the Johnny Cochran skit from South Park there. Chewbacca is a Wookiee. This makes no sense.
Well,
look that one up. It's worth it.
Yeah, you lost me. Noel's your man for that type of stuff. They went overtime against the Bucs in a game they really should have lost. Then last week when the Panthers were driving, they threw an interception and allowed the Falcons to put the game away. But in years gone past, they're the type of games in which the Falcons have lost. Now people are starting to move along. Here come the Falcons now. They're righting the wrongs. They know how to win games. I think we're going to see a shock on Sunday. I'm going to go with the Seahawks.
All right, interesting. Kieran?
Well, I think I'm on record saying that the Falcons are the Jets of the NFC, but I've definitely...
Which is about the worst insult you can level at a team.
Oh, yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with Kieran's contributions to the show.
Doesn't get much
compared to the Jets. Whatever you're doing is not good.
Doesn't get much worse than that. However, I've been very surprised and pleasantly surprised by the Falcons this year. I think they've, past seasons, they've been very flaky. They've had quarterback issues. They just haven't had that kind of fortitude to put up a good season. But I'm very impressed with them this year and what Cousins has been doing. The Falcons have scored 100 points in the last 3 weeks. That's a very balanced offense. They're running the ball really well with Robinson and with Tyler Algier, and they're also mixing that up with a really nice passing game, which is not always the case with Atlanta. Usually they're one-dimensional and they're running the ball a lot. Seahawks are struggling right now. They're on a 3-game slide. They're giving up an average of 25 points a game, and they got the 25th ranked defense in the league. They can't stop the run right now, and Atlanta is going to run all over them. I mean, with Robinson and Algier, they're just going to run up and down, and then they're just going to open up the passing game, little play action, and let Cousins cook. Seahawks are, I did have some reservations about them at the start. I talked about the travel schedule and that they're traveling about 26,000 miles over the season. And these little things kind of get into your head. And I think it's a 1:00 game, if I'm not mistaken, which is, that's always difficult for West Coast teams. But I just like Atlanta's mix of the pass and run. I mean, they're averaging 24.3 points on offense. They're in a flow. Cousins is in a groove. They've had some nice wins this season. 4-2, they're really, keeping pace with the Buccaneers. And I mean, the thing with the Seahawks is that they haven't really got the run game going. I mean, Kenneth Walker has not really been that effective, and most of what they're doing is through the air. And I like the Falcons' defense. I like the fact that they're able to do a nice mix of run and pass. So I like the Falcons in this one. Nice. I think it's going to be a home victory.
No.
Yeah, a lot of what Kieran said there. I like this Falcons offense. I think as the season's gone on, it's starting to really gel together. And I think at home, I think they're good enough to against the Seahawks team that's been a bit iffy.
Yeah, you both make a good case. I'm kind of wavering now on my own pick, but I'm going to stick with where I was and pick the Seahawks, probably for the same reason that Brian did. Call it narrative fallacy. Or just have, there's always one game that you think is not going to go according to script, and this might be that one for me. Right, our next game is Titans at Bills. Biggest spread of the weekend. Bills 8.5-point favorites here, Brian.
Well, I'll make it very clear. I'm out on Will Levis. It's over for me. I take it all back. You know, every off season I have some good picks and some bad picks. This season has been a calamity, which was reflective of my picks over the course of the first 6 weeks of the season. But I expected so much more from this Titans team. I think this Titans team could have won quite a few games this season. You know, I think by and large, like Pollard is, for me, Pollard is an underrated running back, and he had an off season in Dallas last year when he was supposed to take over as kind of the bell cow running back from Zeke Elliott. But he seems to have found himself in Tennessee, and he's putting up some nice numbers. And I think there's players there who can do damage offensively. They just don't have the quarterback in situ to do the job. For me, it's very similar to the Giants. They lost the game last week against the Colts. They should have won. They lost the game against the Bears in week 1. They should have won. It just doesn't make any sense the way things have evolved for them very quickly. And at some stage, they have to pull the plug on this quarterback because he's effectively costing them games. But in this instance, bearing in mind what we saw from the Bills on Monday night, how they were able to, I suppose, right the wrongs of the previous week against the Texans and win a close game. I think it was a similar score as well in terms of the field goal game. The Bills should have way too much. You touched on it there. The spread is 8.5 points with our partner QuinnBet. This is the game that strikes me this weekend. Your rocking chair type of scenario come toward fourth quarter. It's the Bills all day long.
Yeah, same for me, I have to say. I mean, you get to the point of the season where you're looking at the Bills and you're going, "Oh yeah, they are actually really good, aren't they? They're not gonna have come off the boil to the extent that we thought that they might." When Stephon Diggs went out the door and they gave Davis, and they've nobody to throw the ball to. Now, of course, they're after reloading and popping Amari Cooper into the mix. Sean McDermott finds ways to just slot in these no-name defensive backs and make do for the injury depleted side of the ball that they have there. And things are going in their favor in the AFC East. The division is coming to them with what's happened with the Dolphins, with where the Patriots are, obviously with what's going on over at the Jets as well. It's all coming up Buffalo at the moment, and I don't see that changing this weekend. Like you, Brian, disappointed in what the Titans have done this year. There are bits and pieces there. You just think if you squint hard enough, should be in better shape than they are. You know, you mentioned it there. There's 2 games that got away from them. But if you're in the habit of letting games get away from you, then you do not want to be going to Orchard Park this weekend, where I think the Bills will be ready and waiting for them. It's Bills all day long for me as well. No.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you guys. I think this Bills team is just way too strong for this Titans team, and they'll take the win.
Kieran.
Remember Calvin Ridley? Last week, 0 catches. That's kind of sums up the Titans right now. Will Levis has become a meme. Every week there's some crazy picture of him falling over or doing some wild stuff. Yes, Pollard's been pretty handy, but that's not a great team over there. I mean, Will Levis, some people say he wasn't even the best quarterback at Kentucky. So it's not looking good for the Titans, and going to Orchard Park at this time of year, weather's starting a little bit chilly. Like I said, 8.5 is the spread. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised if the Bills won by 14 in this game, but Bills are definitely winning this one.
All right, we're coming to Chiefs 49ers in just a moment, but that brings us to the end of our second segment of Week 7 picks on the Irish NFL Show. We'll take a quick break. Welcome to part 3 of our Week 7 preview and picks show. That break there just brought to you by Buskers on the Ball, where there'll be a watch party this weekend. The 49ers fans, shout out to them. Looking forward to a Super Bowl rematch where they take on the Chiefs. They welcome the Chiefs to Santa Clara. Tightest spread of the weekend. Chiefs favored on the road by 1 point. I'm kicking it off here. And I think the 49ers are going to break the watch party curse this weekend. I have to say, I think the Chiefs have been she's been kind of living on luck a little bit. I think it finally kind of catches them this weekend. You know, we watched a Minnesota Vikings team a couple of years ago pretty much win every single one-score game. That sort of luck doesn't last. I think the Chiefs have been lucky 2 or 3 times this season. I think that finally runs out this weekend. It could be very foolish to back against Patrick Mahomes, but this is one, as we were saying last weekend, or I was saying with the Lions and Cowboys, that the 49ers will have had circled in the calendar that they really want to put down a marker. We know that the 49ers haven't been firing on all cylinders. We know that the well-oiled machine that they are, when all of the parts aren't shiny and polished, it isn't quite looking the same. And, you know, that's something that does slightly concern me in this one. But I do think they make a home stand against the Chiefs this weekend. Kieran, what do you reckon?
This is a fascinating matchup. Mahomes is 9-3 in his career as an underdog. And, you know, with the Chiefs going into Santa Clara, San Francisco averages 5.2 plays with 20 more yards per game, which is the most in the league. I mean, the Chiefs are 12-0 in their last 12 games on the West Coast. These are all some crazy stats and things to bear in mind. Everything on paper says the Niners should win this, probably the better roster. But for me, it always goes back to Mahomes and what he's able to do. Even with a kind of a diminished wide receiver room, Juju and Xavier Worthy, but he's still able, even after losing the running back, Pacheco, even after losing him, I mean, they're still able to churn out win after win against some quality teams. The Niners, yes, you know, we can see what they do on offense, and, you know, Purdy's been keeping them moving and keeping them alive. But that Niners defense still doesn't seem to be where it's been the last couple of years. It still doesn't seem to be, you know, humming on all parts. I mean, Fred Warner is Fred Warner and Bosa is Bosa, but, you know, Charvarius Ward hasn't exactly been where he's been the last couple of years, and they've been suffering with injuries.
They really miss Dre Greenlaw there, don't they? I mean, you see the extent to which they're dependent on having those two outstanding linebackers there, those hybrid players who are so essential in the modern NFL. Only having half of that, you know, makes a big difference. No more than, you know, we've seen the Ravens deploy something similar in their own defensive scheme. The Niners have leaned on that very heavily. He's a massive loss. He
is. And it's just not seem. I mean, the Niners, they're doing enough, but they're not doing great right now. But they're doing enough to stay in contention in that division and in the NFC. But it just doesn't look the same it has been the last couple of years. The other factor for me is a guy that won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants, Steve Spagnuolo. You know, we talk about Flores, but Spagnuolo is one of the absolute masterminds in this league. And between him, Chris Jones, and that defense, I mean, that's really what's gotten the Chiefs this far so far. I mean, I don't want to say he's underrated, but, you know, he's definitely one of the best there is in the league. And then that's always a huge factor when the Chiefs play. When you add everything up, I mean, Mahomes is a generational talent, like we all know. I think if you put it on paper and looked at the talent on each side, you'd probably give it to the Niners by 3. But I just can't see the Chiefs losing this. I think I always talk about muscle memory and the ability to pull out a win. I mean, like I said earlier, they're 12-0 in games on the West Coast. Mahomes just finds a way to win these games, and even with a depleted run game and, you know, less than stellar wide receivers. Yes, he's got Kelsey, who's always finds himself in 10 yards of space for some reason. But I just, you know, with all that said, and I think it's gonna be a great game, a nice back and forth offensive game. I just think the Chiefs are going to pick it by 3, just like they seem to do this season, and like they've done the last couple of seasons. So I like the Chiefs.
Brian, contrary to what I said earlier, the Niners are actually favored by 1 point in this one. My apologies. It's them who are 1 point favorites.
No, that's my bad now, Connor. I was the one incorrectly input the line on that. I was
taking one for you there. I was Dan Campbelling for you, leader that I am.
No. We're better off being upfront and honest about this. And in this case, I'll be upfront and honest about this one. The 49ers offensive line has struggled this season, in particular pass protection, which for me, that just whets the appetite for the types of defense that Steve Spagnuolo can put together. I think Purdy will have a day where he's running for his life, and I think the Chiefs will find a way to win. They're coming off the bye week. People will argue that the 49ers have had their mini bye 10 days since they beat the Seahawks. I don't think the Seahawks were able to kind of put a glove on Purdy for large parts of that game. I think it'll be different on Sunday. I think the Chiefs will find a way to get out of Santa Clara with the victory.
No.
I very rarely do this and go against the Chiefs, and I take everything that Brian and Kieran said there, but I just have a feeling that this 49ers team, this is like their mid-season Super Bowl. They really, with the form they've been on, given their last game at home was that disappointing loss to the Cardinals, I think they'll be out to fix that. I think they do have the players to do it when things click. This Chiefs team is still the class of the NFL, but I just think at home the 49ers are going to be right up for this, and I think they'll get a victory in what should be a really, really good game.
Good stuff. Next game up is Raiders at Rams. Two teams who can't fill a stadium. If you happen to be knocking around Inglewood at the weekend, it's probably the best place to pick up a ticket and see yourself in an NFL game. They could have held this one in Parnell Park, I'd say. They would have just about filled that. The Rams 5.5-point favourites here, Brian. For the 40 people who go, what kind of game are they going to see?
No, look, you're doing it to Sarah's. This game is going to be full of Raiders fans. This is SoFi. This is Raiders going in against the Chargers, going in against the Rams. They will have a huge abundance of fans there in the black and silver, no matter what the circumstances are. But it's a unique week as well, because they tried to put off that they were making it very clear Davante Adams wasn't in the picture. Then Antonio Pierce kind of rolled back slightly last week and said, no, we're not necessarily going to trade him, which was complete and utter nonsense, because all they were doing essentially was trying to drive a market up for the player. They got a third round, potentially a second round, so you could argue they got what they wanted. And then obviously yesterday we have the news that Tom Brady has been declared as an owner of a certain percentage of the team, and he's there getting the fanfare as he arrived at the.
I'm still laughing at the picture you sent around to the WhatsApp group of Tom Brady with the Mark Davis haircut. That's haunting. You can't unsee that.
I don't know if you've seen it took an opportunity to watch the video of him arriving at the facility yesterday as well, Connor, and he walked in and everybody's applauding him. He loves the attention. It's fantastic. It's going to be an interesting time for him now, with being a part of the crew in terms of making ownership, and maybe he can steer them in the right direction. He's done a reasonably good job with Birmingham in terms of being involved there, so we'll see what comes of it. Look, for this game, I'm surprised by the line. 5.5 points for a Rams team that are severely depleted with injuries, and there's talk of Cooper Kupp potentially coming back this weekend. There's even talk of Matthew Stafford being traded to the Giants in the coming weeks. Connor, that's how off-putting things are for me right now with the Rams, which I found a bit bizarre. In this instance, I think the Rams will win, but it's not a game that I think we're going to be convinced as a high-scoring game. I think both teams have their problems.
No.
Yeah, Brian Settons at the end there says it all. Both teams have the problems. You feel bad for the Rams. They've obviously had so many injuries. It's been crazy for them so early in the season. But this Raiders team is starting to devolve into a mess. I mean, they keep flipping their quarterback in game week to week. You just don't know what you're getting from this offense. I mean, Brock Bowers has looked like a really, really good player they brought in. But other than that, they can't really get anything going on this offense. This Rams team, you can't be 100% confident in them in terms of the injuries they've had, but I still think they have too much. This could be a case of the Raiders maybe losing this game even more than the Rams kind of winning it. Although this Rams defense will be able to get after this Raiders offense. Jared Verse has looked really good as well this season when he's had his chances. So it's not going to be a great game. It could go either way just because of the injuries, but I just think Matthew Stafford and the Rams will be too good for a Raiders team that seems to be starting to really slide. And yeah, I can't see them getting the results.
Kieran, who's it for you?
Like Dennis Green said all those years ago, they are who we thought they were. The Raiders are who we thought they were, and now they reverted to what everyone, I thought they were going to be. They're minus 10 in the turnover differential. I mean, that's a telling stat. You saw O'Connell throwing that pick last week. The team is just, it's just in flux right now. Seeing that Cooper Kupp could be back, I mean, that's going to be a huge boost for the Rams. But they also have Kyron Williams, who's able to chew up yards on the ground. Rams have won 5 of the last 6 home games. So despite the fact that it's SoFi and it's basically going to be Raiders, a home game for the Raiders, I like the Rams at home. I think they've got enough, despite all the horrendous amount of injuries that they've gone through this season. So I like the Rams by 7.
Yeah, just finding it hard to see Antonio Pierce out-coaching Sean McVay here. This is a different team. Maybe at their peak, you might have seen the Raiders have a chance, but no, I'm not seeing it here. It's Rams for me. Panthers at Commanders next up. I'll kick this one off. Commanders coming off that defeat to the Ravens last week. A bit of a big boy moment, I guess, for Jaden Daniels and that young Commanders team. Ravens obviously kind of in the end relatively comfortably winning that one, but I thought the Commanders gave a decent account of themselves. You know, like they were clearly overmatched there, and they're always going to be overmatched, as most teams would be going to Baltimore these days. Let's be fair about that one. But I've seen so much of what I like from Dan Quinn's team this year on both sides of the ball. I think their defense slightly underrated. You know, again, they were put up against it by, you know, an absolute juggernaut of an offense last week that, you know, let's not forget had put up a 4-touchdown performance against the Bengals the previous week as well. They really are in all aspects of the game just flying right now. Panthers obviously represent a very different challenge, and much in the way that I was talking about the Lions and the fear of maybe a slightly come down after their game. I think it's the other way around for the Commanders. I think they come out of playing one of the best teams in the NFL last week and welcome the Panthers to town. I think that's the perfect salve for whatever wounded pride they may have had coming out of that game in Baltimore, the Maryland Derby as it was. And I think the Commanders bounce back and have the perfect rebound performance against the Carolina Panthers this weekend. No.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, look, 34, 36, and 38 are the points that the Panthers have given up over the last 3 games. You look at this Commanders offense, you know, we've talked about the balance they've got between the run game and Jaden Daniels in the pass game. You know, the offensive line is doing a good job. So this offense should be way, way too strong. I mean, the Panthers defense is not having a good season, and you add to the injuries that they have, especially at the linebacking position. It just feels like a way too big mountain to climb for this Panthers team to be able to outscore this Washington team. This Commanders offense is too good. I mean, the Panthers have got better when they brought in Dalton from Bryce Young, but it's still not enough. They're still a poor team. And when you add those injuries in and you put them up against an offense like the Commanders, which has been racking up the points itself, for me, there's no contest in this one. The Commanders are too strong and should take this by a few points.
Kieran?
Yeah, I mean, the Panthers, they had that brief little spell when Dalton came in and it looked like he was going to turn around. But again, they've gone back to what they are. They've been outscored by 100 points, the worst margin in the league. They, you know, all of their losses have been double-digit losses. So, I mean, again, it comes down to talent on the field. Adam Thielen, Chuba Hubbard, Leggett, can they match up against what the Commanders have with Eckler, Robinson, and even Zach Ertz? So, you know, it's going to be a Commanders win. That's pretty clear. I mean, the other factor that, you know, doesn't get talked about as much with a lot of the Commanders pickups was Bobby Wagner. I think he's had 56 tackles this season so far, and he's just going to tee up on Dalton and on this defense.
Yeah, Wagner and Lubu, one of the underrated linebacker combinations this year. They've been really good. I
mean, everyone talks about Washington, and rightly so, with Daniels and the skill players, but Bobby Wagner's turned out to be a really good pickup for them. So this is going to be another double-digit loss for the Panthers, unfortunately.
Brian?
I'm going to talk about a different game, and it is the Commanders, but it's the Commanders against the Bears, which is a crucial game coming next week, which got flexed during the week to 8:25 our time next week because the clock changed. Last year, we were joking about the fact they played each other on a Thursday night. The previous season, we were all joking about it on a Thursday night, the game which Noel attended in Soldier Field. And now all of a sudden, we're looking forward to this game like no other next week. As long as the Commanders don't think too far ahead and get complacent, because it is such a big game next week, 4th pick of the draft, 2nd pick of the draft, they should be fine on Sunday. That's the only way I can see if they just aren't on the game because they're thinking too far ahead.
Very good. Right, we roll into Sunday night football now, where Jets, Kieran's favourite team, take on the Steelers. Jets favoured in this one on the road, no less. But can they pull it out? Kieran, sorry, that's over to you.
You say me?
Yeah.
Well, where do we start? I have no idea how the favorites. I have no idea how that came about. This is the team that puts their own mascot, Fireman Ed, a Dolphins fan who quit on his team in 2012, decided not to come back to the stadium years later. Now he's back and he's complaining he's not getting screen time at MetLife. This is the Jets. This is the Jets where Aaron Rodgers calls the shots and fires Mike Williams. This is the Jets who have Salah. You know, we're getting videos of Salah outside of a grocery store in somewhere in New Jersey, probably. This is the Jets right now. This is the Jets where Devontae Adams goes on the Pat McAfee show with Rodgers, and it looks like they had a sleepover. I mean, all you're missing was pillows and blankets. This is the Jets right now. I don't understand how the only thing I can see is that Wilson is starting and that there's a little bit of quarterback, flux with the Steelers, but there's there's no way the Steelers should be underdog in this game. Steelers. Well, I'll go back to the Jets. I mean, the only thing that will give Jets fans hope, or even kind of neutral observers, was the fact that Rodgers kind of went back to his Green Bay days against the Bills the other night. A lot of shotgun, a lot of play action, and he mixed it up. He looked freer and looser in the offense, and he gave Breece Hall the ball a lot. And the offense looked more in sync than it has all season with Todd Downing out there. But saying that, they were still unable to get past the Bills. The Steelers, I fully expect Fields to come in at some stage during the game. I know it looks like it's going to start Wilson, and that's what it is. I mean, we talked in the last couple of weeks about the Steelers kind of spluttering on offense, and it's really been Boswell who's got them a lot of the wins. Boswell and T.J. Watt. So I can understand why it looks like they're going to have a quick look at Wilson. I don't know why it's this game though, but still, I would expect Fields to be in the game at some stage in the third quarter if it's going a little south. A telling stat: the Steelers have outscored opponents 80-36 in the second half of games this year. So the Jets are going to have to put up at least 10 points, 10 to 12 points in the second half to have a chance, I think. But I don't. Again, I don't give the Jets much chance in this game. I think there's way too much dysfunction. Getting in somebody like Davante Adams, who's in his 30s, is past his prime, much like Rodgers, and they're the Jets have issues with the O-line. The Jets have issues with the pass run. I mean, with the pass rush, and they're putting a Band-Aid on this open wound. And Davante Adams is going to get all the headlines, and it's going to get all the media coverage on Get Up and First Take and all those shows that people say that they watch. But that's not. They're addressing the wrong issue. For me, if the Jets are going to be going all in, as it seems they are, because if it doesn't happen this year, then Rodgers walks. Adams is going to go somewhere else to see out the last year or two of his career. So, I mean, at this stage, why don't they go out and get Myles Garrett or get some other piece or a big O lineman that they need for this time of year? It's just a splashy move from the Jets. I don't think it's going to have any. There might be a little kind of payoff short term. But when we get into November, December, I don't see the Adams, trade being that much of a factor because the Jets have too many issues from top to bottom. I like the Steelers naturally in this game. It wouldn't matter who the Jets were playing. I like the other team, but I definitely like the Steelers in this game at home. They got that home crowd. Boswell, T.J. Watt. That's all you need, really. So give me the Steelers.
Why don't they go out and get someone like Hassan Reddick? Imagine they had a chance to sign someone like him. Brian.
I think the Steelers are doing a terrible mistake of bringing Russell Wilson in. And it's not because I think Justin Fields has been playing so well, but Justin Fields, he's on wheels last weekend because he had 2 touchdowns in that game. He ran for yards. He's done it again. He ran in 2 touchdowns in Indianapolis in a game, which they came short and lost the game. But I think Najee Harris and Warren have been effective in the run game because teams have to factor Justin Fields in a run-oriented situation. Like the run-pass option is always there for them. That's not going to be there with Russell Wilson. That part of the game is completely diminished. And I know Kieran's saying, okay, then fine, they'll mix it up, bring him in. But effectively, your Russell Wilson is your starting quarterback for 4 quarters. So either they feel that he's not getting the ball to Pickens and other players offensively, and they can do damage with Russell Wilson there. I'm not sold on that. I think they should continue with doing what they're doing. I think the Jets defense would struggle against a quarterback who has movement that can do things in the run game as opposed to continuously passing it. And I think the Jets should have won Monday's game, and I think they should have won the game in New York. But your record is what they say it is, as the old saying goes. But in this instance, I'm not sold on the Steelers. And when I pick against the Steelers, they win. So I'm going to pick the Jets because at some stage, it has to go their way. They can't continuously lose games, tight games that they're in. They have to get over the line at some stage. And I think Sunday night might be the game in which to do it because I'm not sold on the Steelers. So it's the Jets for me.
Noel, your pick?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Brian said there. I can see where Kieran's coming from. His points are all valid, but it's a mix of, I think the Jets are going to get it better at some point, and I just don't trust what the Steelers have. And then when you start messing around with quarterbacks after 6 games, and I know Justin Fields wasn't setting the world alight, but still he was not turning the ball over, and he was kind of being competent. So I don't know why you start messing with your quarterback position. Maybe they just feel he wasn't driving them forward enough in the pass game. They think Wilson maybe can come in and do that. But I'm just going to take the Jets to steal a close one again, because I don't trust the Steelers, and I do think the Jets at some point will have to get a win. They have some good players there, so why not this week?
Yeah, I find it hard to argue against any of the points that have been made on either side, but obviously you have to come down on one or the other. I do have concerns about that Jets O-line, and I do see in a scenario where the Steelers tee off on him and put Rodgers under the kind of duress that he's been under several games this season, that it could be a very long day at the office. But I also think that when he's been kept upright and when the offense has been tuned according to what he wants to see, and obviously that's why they brought in Devontae Adams, there are flashes of what he can do, and he's still making throws that you see very few quarterbacks in the league able to make. He's still able to do that. He still has that. I don't trust the Steelers' offense enough to score the points that I think they're going to need to win this game, particularly with Russell Wilson under center. Personally, think Russell Wilson is absolutely washed. I think they would have been better off rolling with Fields, who actually has a better passer rating than Patrick Mahomes this season. But that's not what they've chosen to do. I get nervous picking against the Steelers because I had a mare with them last season, but that's what I'm going to do for this week. And that indeed is our lot for our Week 7 picks and preview show. If you're interested in Monday Night Football, doubleheader reminder this Monday, we got Ravens at Bucks and we got Chargers at Cardinals. We'll have our Monday Night Football predictions ready for you on Monday afternoon. We're also back on Monday at 9 o'clock, of course, for our recap show to look at all the main talking points from the Sunday games. And we'll have our instant reaction podcast available from 2 a.m. Monday morning for all the early risers, shift workers, and early commuters who might want to have that locked and loaded and to have that podcast and to listen to on the way to work. That's your lot for now, though. Thanks very much for tuning into the Irish NFL Show.